Welcome back, Princess. In our next movie, we will be learning about how to save data in the iPhone. So some of the problems you might face as your iPhone programming is you'll build an application and the user will input some data or some settings, but then that data or settings needs to become available for further future times when the user loads up the app. Because if you don't save some data, then once it closes out, it won't be available. So how are we going to do that? We're going to do that by taking that data that the user inputted and then saving that data to a plist file. And then being sure to when the application closes out, there's a notification that's sent out. Then it's that point when the data gets saved. And then the data is then loaded at the time when the application launches back up. And we'll be sort of detecting these events using the notification center. So that's a brief overview of how we're going to proceed, and I'd like to demonstrate that for you. So let's start up Xcode. We'll say new project. Oh, let me share the screen with you. All right, Princess, can you see the screen okay? Okay. Okay. So we'll just have a single view application, and then um, we'll call this save app data. And we'll make this a iPhone app and use storyboards. We'll go ahead and create that. So now we have our main storyboard file, and we'll be dropping user interface elements onto there. So one element that we want to use in this app will be the text field. So we need to find that text field in our objects library. And then we also need to, let's just choose another user interface element. We'll go ahead and use a date picker. So those will be the two elements that the user will be able to kind of configure and input data into, and then we'll be wanting to save that state. So if you recall, we'll go to our objects library, and let's find the text field. We'll drag that on there. There's our text field. And then let's find that date picker. There's that. And let's give this maybe a bit of a theme. We'll just call this, say registration. Oops. And we'll put a label to sort of tell the purpose. User registration. And then we'll go ahead and say give this a label. It's, maybe this is a name. So this is where you input your name for user registration. And then you need to also input a birthday. All right. We'll go ahead and give this a background color. It's under Attributes Inspector. Oh, I guess we have to just select the window itself. Okay, the window view. Okay. Maybe light gray. Okay, so we've just loaded up our, let's go ahead and make this bold. System bold. Oops, we need to widen this a little. Center that. All right, we'll be having a user inputting the name and birthday. Oh, that means we should set this to the date picker. Yeah, that's better. All right, we'll just run this in the simulator to make sure we've got all of our user interface elements. Something's going on with the simulator. I'll close it off and then run it again. Okay, looks pretty good. We'll just say princess is the name. And then, ooh, that's not so good. It's not dismissing the keyboard. How should we fix that? Let's cause it to. Well, I don't really want to get into that because that adds complexity. I'll just close it down, and then we'll first set the birth date. Say January 1st, 2000. Oh, let's see, 87. All right, we set the birthday there. Princess. Oh, but it's still kind of in the way. Okay, I'll come back to that issue. So now what we'll be doing is we need outlets for these two user interface elements. So let's open up that assistant editor, and we've got the code for the view controller here, and then our nib file. So first, what we'll do is let's go to the header. We'll hold down in my case, it's control, might be command for you, I'm not sure, but control drag in the outlet, let go, and this is going to be the name field. Okay, added that. It's hooked up. Now this is going to be the date picker, and we'll just say birthday date picker. Okay. So now we've got our outlet set up. Let's go back to the main editor. And the place that we want to be working in now is the implementation file for the view controller. And you see our template provided us with this code. And what we need to do is, because we're using storyboard, we can use a method called init with coder. So that's going to be launching right away when this view loads. And in fact, we can use this special code snippet sort of library and search for init with coder, and then just drag it on, just similar to how we were dragging on our user interface elements into our nib. So here we drag it on. Looks good. It's helpful to drag it in from the library because it can be kind of complex looking in a way, with these super self calls and stuff like that. And it's this area that's gonna launch. So let's prove that this is launching. So we'll just say start init with coder method, and we'll run that, and let's just check that it's printing it to the console. There, yeah, right. You see, right when the app loaded, it printed this out. The start init with coder. And then let's see what's going on in the life cycle. So we closed out, it didn't launch. Then we came back into the foreground. We didn't exactly close it. We brought it into background state, and then it's not calling that again. Let's close it down. So we'll terminate it. Okay, that terminated it. And then let's relaunch it. All right, so it's actually not connected to the sort of debugger, so we didn't see a notification of that. So this method gets called right when the app launches. And it's here that we're going to be using the notification center. So we say ns notification center default center add observer, and that will be self, and then selector. At selector. And now this is going to be a custom method that we'll be building here. So we'll be calling that save data. And then the name. So this is the name of the event. So the particular event or method that's being called is going to be in the app delegate. And that's UI application did enter background, and then object nil. I'm not quite sure what this other stuff that's popping up is about, but that's not needed. So we delete that other stuff out. And then we need to create that custom method, the save data method. So that'll be a void save data. And let's go ahead and do an nslog to prove that this method is getting called. And so that's supposed to be called when the application did enter background, because we're setting up the notification center observer. So we'll just say here, app entered background, because this is the point when we need to be saving our data when it goes into the background. And we'll also run this to just check that our NSLogs are saving correctly. So start init with coder, princess. Let's enter the background. There, app entered background. So it called this method save data when it went into the background state. And then we'll go ahead and there, it changed there. So it's now been called twice, the app entered background, because we went in and out twice. All right, it's looking good. So this is the point when we're saving the data. And the way we'll be saving the data is by using the NSArrays write to file method. That can save to a plist nicely. And we'll be assigning those two outlets to an array, and it's the array that's going to be saved. So we'll say NSArray value equals NSArray alloc init with objects, and then self dot, what are these called? Is it name field? Yeah, name field. Maybe text. All right, that looks good. And then we have self dot date or birth date picker date. And then it closes off with a nil. I'll make some more space here. So this value array now contains the content that we want to save. And we'll go ahead and do an nslog to make sure we're looking good here. And we'll just say the value contains, and we can just print that value array here. We can just put value here and print that as a string, because what it does is it calls the description method that all objects have, and allows us to view the contents. So we'll just say save or princess, and it's hard to see this thing, but anyways, it's supposed to be more than 2022 is the year. It should be more than 2022. Okay, let's close out. There. So yeah, so the value got printed out. And it's prints, and then 2023. So it's behaving well. Now this is where we write to our plist. So we have an instance of an NSArray value, and we use our write to file. And we're going to actually be using a helper method, and we'll call that get file path. We need to write that in a minute. Atomically, yes. All right, let's write that helper method. So it will return an NS string, it's going to be a pointer. So we need a star. And this is, well, I'll go ahead and copy that. All right. So this is a little tricky, but this is basically where the data will be stored. So we'll have an NS array path, NS search path for directories in domains. And what we're doing is we're searching for the NS document, not documentation, but document directory, because that's where this is going to be saved. NS user domain mask, yes. NS string my file path object at index 0 string by appending path component. We'll just call this saved data.plist. And then that's the loaded up file path of where this should be saved. So it's simply returning a string, my file. All right, so this is using the NS search path for directories and domains and the document directory in order to give us our path that we want to be saving the data at. And then this is the specific file name of where it will be saved, a plist. And so we call that on self, and that returns our file path, and then we write the file. This NS array has a method write to file where we can basically save that array at the file path specified. So we'll run that, but let's maybe print out what that file path is as part of our kind of iterative process. File path, my file, run that. So we'll see what the path actually looks like when we print out. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and put in your name, Princess. And let's go to the background state. Okay, now what do we have here? Okay, start init with coder, app entered background, value, we printed out princess, then this date. And now this is the, so file path colon, this. This is our file path. So it's very difficult, it can't be guessed because there's this funky number sequence. And then documents, and then here, saved data.plist. So that's what we specified. So the NS search path for directories and domains, that helped us come up with this stuff, this file path, and then this is what we specified. So it's looking really good. All right, so that was our helper function, the get file path. Now we need to have it so it doesn't just save the data, but it loads up the data when the application enters the foreground state again. And for for that, we're going to use our NS notification center once again and set up another notification. So we'll say NS notification center default center add observer. That'll be self once again. And then we'll be using the similar pattern as above. Selector, @ selector, and this time another custom helper method. We'll call that load data. I did some strange auto-completing. I'll just delete that. All right, so load data, that's a custom method we'll be building in a minute. And then name, that will be a UI application did become active notification. And then it's adding some stuff. We'll get rid of for key path. Actually, we don't need that either. But we do want to say object nil. Oops. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. We want name to be right there. So name UI application did become active notification, object nil. So this sets up our notification for when the application did become active notification. And if you're not sure where these notifications are coming from, so if you remember in our app delegate, there are different methods that's going to be called throughout the life cycle of the application. And so you can see here, application did finish launching with options. Application will resign active. Application did enter background. So that's one we're listening to. We need a notification of that in our view controller. And then application did become active. So we're sort of listening in on these two methods in the app delegate from our view controller. All right. So now let's go ahead and make that custom method. So it's called load data. And let's first do an nslog to make sure it's behaving as expected. Load data. Put a princess. And then we'll go to the background state. Okay. Looking good. So entered background state, printed out the values. Then this is the file path. Let's go back in. Okay. And then when it hit that entered foreground state, it printed out load data as expected. So that's the point in the application lifecycle when we want to load back our data. Now you notice we already have the data there. That's because the iPhone is saving it for this sort of simple back and forth operations. But if we actually terminated the app, then it would lose that information. So we'll go ahead and implement the load data. And we do that by grabbing that file path to start with. And this string and this is the file path. And we simply say self and call it get file path. Call that method. And we want to first check if the file exists. And if it exists, then we go ahead and load in the data. So this will be a Boolean value. which means yes or no or on or off or whatever. File exists. So we're checking, does the file exist? And we'll be using the NS file manager, default file manager. File exists at path. And then what's the path? It's file path. And then if file exists, then we load in the data. So we have an NS array. We'll just call it saved data equals NS array alloc init with contents of file path. That's where our data is saved, that file path. And now hopefully that data is loaded up into this array, and then we simply assign the data in that array to our outlets. And we do that by saying self name field equals text save data 0. So it's the first element. That's where our the name field is saved in that first element. And then we'll load up the second element. So self, this is the birthday date picker, date equals saved data 1. Now let's see if this works. So we can see it seems to have loaded up already with that princess. Let's maybe close it out entirely. And then we'll restart. Oh, I think it had saved it from princess already. Okay, and we had cleared that out. So let's first let's make it kind of a memorable. So we'll call it, say, 2000 January 1st, 2000. So it's January 1st, 2000. And then we'll put in the name princess. Okay, now when we go out, go back in, okay, it's still there as expected. But let's close it out now. All right, it's closed out. Stop simulator. But let's go back in. Let's see if it's there. There we go. See, princess, and then it rewired itself on the date picker to January 1st, 2000. And notice that little animation effect. It started out as today's date, and then it turned itself to the save date. So we've done it. You're now able to save data and make that available for later times when the app loads.